Welcome back. Today we're going to be taking a look at what we can do to use the Sand Lab, one of the nifty assignments created for computer science and doing some really cool education processes. The first thing we need to do is we need to make a brand new project in Eclipse, just like normal. I named mine Sand Project, as you can see. And then we need to download the files from Canvas. You can also get them, of course, off of the Nifty Assignments website. There's 3 files: Sand Display, Sand Lab, and Sand Runner. Those are the 3 files you need to grab from this. The Sand Runner is just a regular runner. As you can see, it just starts the new Sand Lab object, gets it to run. That's it. We're done. We're out of the way. The Sand Display is where all the GUI stuff happens. We're not working with this at all in class right now, so we're just going to close it and not worry about it either. So we'll close that out of the way too. And then we're going to start off with just Sand Lab. So Sand Lab is what we're going to be working with here in class, and this is the file we're going to be working with directly. So when we first start off with Sand Lab, as you can see right here, has some explanation as to how the method works and what's set up with it. If I hit play on my application right now, my application will start and run. So we'll drag that up here. And here's my empty and metal. I can click on the button. Nothing happens when I click on it. That's great. That's wonderful. But the app itself starts off and runs immediately. So that's one of the nice things about this. The instructions and stuff for all the project are located right inside class. You can go to the Canvas website and get all the information to do this. And so you can have to go through this. You can also look at the actual code itself. You can see there's some little hints as to where you need to make some work happen. The first thing we have to change is right here inside the constructor. It says we need to add some code to initialize the data member grid with the same dimensions. So we take a look at our data members right here. So we have a public static final int empty is 0, public static final int metal is 1. And so, we've got those. Those are initialized. We don't have to worry about them. We'll talk more about them later. Then we have a couple other data members or fields. We have private 2D array int grid and then private sand display display. Okay, cool. So we've got 2 other ones. They're not initialized. Let's go take a look for them. I have a string array names, a local variable inside my constructor, and that's a new initialized string array too. Okay, that's initialized. We're good to go. We don't have to worry about that. And the name sub empty equals empty, name sub metal equals metal. Okay, it's got those, and then we saw those on the screen, so we know that's where that comes from. Cool, we'll worry about them more later. And then display is initialized right here as a new sand display, passing it falling sand, num rows, num calls, and names. Oh, so we're using parameters from the constructor to do something. That's a really great clue. That means right here inside my Sand Lab, my constructor, I need to add the code to make that happen. So let's go ahead and do that. So inside my Sand Lab constructor, we want to initialize our grid data member, the only one that's not initialized yet, with the parameters num rows and num calls, so we can initialize that. So it's really quite easy. I just simply say grid equals, and then it's a new, and it's a 2D array of ints, so I just do int, and then 2 sets of square brackets, followed by a semicolon. The first square bracket when we're talking Java always deals with the rows, so we'll do num rows right here, passing it the same one we're right there, and then num calls for the number of columns. And this guarantees we have a rectangular 2D array of ints that's the same grid size as what we're sending to Sand Display. Oh, good. I'm going to go ahead and hit save. I've got that right here. I can play this app again right now. It's going to start up and initialize, and it still does nothing. But that's okay. It doesn't break. That's a really good sign. So we'll go ahead and we'll quit that out of the way. We'll move on. So our next step that we need to do, going ahead, step 2, is we need to assign the values associated with the parameters to the grid. So this is called when the user clicks on the location given the tool. And so location clicked, it's given a row and a column and a tool. So we need to say row, column, tool. Those are the 3 things we need to use when we're doing that. So we need to assign that tool to that space inside the grid. And so when we're talking inside a 2D array, we use the row and the column to specify that location, and then we assign it a value. So that just is a quick 1-line thing. So we're just going to say that grid, and then sub row, sub call, I use the sub for subscript notation, is assigned the value of tool. So whatever tool I'm painting with inside my app, I'm assigning it to the corresponding value in my 2D array. And so now my grid has a value assigned to it. I hit save, I play again. That's not going to make any changes, just like we noticed inside the actual instructions. So if you read the instructions, you'll notice you can't do anything else yet too. Boom, metal, empty, nothing happens. No biggie. But now the next step is step 3, where we're going to start to see some changes. We scroll down just a smidge further, and in step 3, we have a update each element of the grid into display. So this is where we need to talk about the display itself. And so what we need to do is we need to say the display, and the display has the knowledge of how to deal with color. And so if we take a look at Sand Display, just a quick look at that right there, one of the methods inside Sand Display is a lovely set color method. And so that set color method right here takes a row, a column, and a color, and it applies that color to that spot of the cell. So what we need to do is inside our Sand Lab, we need to tell that color to it. And we've got a nice little hint right here, use a nested for loop. We need to update every spot inside that. So we'll use a standard traditional for loop. We can't use a for each because we're assigning values. And we're just going to go ahead and assign that value to each spot inside there. So we'll use a for and then int row equals 0. Row is less than grid.length. We'll make sure we go over all of the values. So row is less than grid.length. Make sure we go over every single value inside the array, and we'll go row plus plus. So we go up over every single row. And then for our inner loop, we'll do it in row major order. So we'll do the columns next. So we'll have another for loop, and then int call equals 0. Call is less than grid sub 0.length. And I use sub 0 because we're always talking about guaranteed rectangle arrays in class, so we're going to work on that. And I'm just going to use the dot length on here. And so dot length, and then call plus plus. So I'm guaranteed to go over all the rows, all the columns right there. So I'm talking about that. And so because I want to update every single element of the display based on that, I'm going to use that information. And so now the next thing I have to do is to use that set color. So for each spot inside there, I have to make a decision as to what I'm doing. And so what I need to do is just a quick thing. I have to grab the tool that's at the spot inside the grid. And if that tool happens to be one thing, I'll assign it a color. If the tool happens to be metal, I'll assign it a gray color. So we're going to say if and then parens, and then we will say grid and then sub row sub call equals empty. We'll start with the default case. So if we have an empty case, then we're going to draw black. So we'll do display, and we'll tell it to set its color. And we're going to pass it row, column, and color dot black, which means the default color of my screen will be black for every empty space inside it. However, if I have a metal space, so if and then parens, grid sub row sub call equals metal. So if I'm dealing with a metal, I want to set that color to be display dot set color. I'm going to pass it row, column, and color dot gray. So that way when I draw, it'll be a gray color. So now just to start off with that, let's go ahead and hit play. Now we can actually check to make sure this works. And when I click on my screen, if I click with a metal tab, look at that, I can draw on it. If I click with an empty tag, I can replace any existing click spot with a black square. This is amazing. And so that's the first 3 steps to go through and do. Next, as we go along, as we continue going through this, the next step to go through, we have step 4. We have to add constants for other types like sand, water, fire, bunnies, lava, explosions, etc. And each of those values get added as a new static final int. You want to make sure you always refer to this name of this, not the number, because it becomes very easy to get confused if you worry about numbers in this. So definitely work with that. You then have to, of course, update the value for the string array and the names to go along with that. Sand, for example, is the next assignment on there, and so you can take a look at how to do that in the next video, but that's where we'll go from there. And then continuing on, making sure you have different effects like gravity, etc., happening based on that. But that's all you have to do to start off. Go ahead and have a great time. Cheers, and we'll see you next. Bye.